We've got a lot on this podcast, Rube. Talked to Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni at the Combine today.
Yeah, and probably be quite a while before we talk to either one again, but certainly Howie during the offseason, he'll disappear into his office. We'll talk to him at the draft and then final cuts. That might be it. Any big free agency signings, he might emerge from the third floor, but second floor. But yeah, big day today.
Yep, this is the Eagle Eye Podcast brought to you by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. I rushed back to my hotel room, Rube. I've got nice hotel artwork behind me.
That's beautiful. Is that for sale?
No, you're allowed to just take it, I think. So I'll be taking these home in my checked bag, especially the race car one. I like the race car one.
It is. Is that like a Formula One type thing? I can't really see.
Yeah, I think that's like an Indy 500 nod.
Okay. Oh, yeah, you're in Indianapolis. That's right.
I am in Indianapolis.
Have you ever gone to the Speedway? It's pretty cool. You can kind of drive underneath the grandstand and into the infield and check it out.
I have not. That'd be cool. Maybe I'll do that. Not this week. I have a lot going on this week. A busy day at the Combine. Obviously, the NFL Combine is all about like gearing up for the draft. All the players are here. It's the really a big point in the NFL draft process. But before the draft comes free agency, and that's ends up being what you talk to GMs and coaches about, some other league matters. So a lot to talk about today. I think we'll start off with the Eagles offseason. March 10th is the beginning of whatever you call it, the negotiating window, legal tampering. It's really the beginning of free agency. And I think Howie Roseman did a good job today letting everyone know that this team is going to look different in 2025 than it did in 2024.
Yeah, he did. And that's soon. That's 2 weeks away for the legal tampering period. It really comes at you quickly when you play in a Super Bowl. They're not going to be able to keep everybody, and he's not going to pretend that they are. They just aren't in a position financially to do it. And so you prioritize things. We'll see what he can afford to do, what he can afford not to do. He still wants to add, and he said, if we're going to add, we're going to have to subtract from somewhere else. So it's a balancing act. It's a juggling act. It's something Howie's very, very good at. And if they do lose somebody, they're going to use that money wisely. I mean, that's his, at least for the last several years, that's what he's been doing. So, we'll see who it is. You can kind of come up with some educated guesses who might not be here in 2025. But, the team's going to look very different. And I don't think that in itself is a bad thing. I think when you win a Super Bowl, it's important to keep moving forward and trying to improve and get better. It's something I don't think they did a great job of 17 to 18. They kind of let that team stay together a little longer than maybe it should have. But I think they learned from that. And, it's tough. This seems very close. Fans are really attached to this group. And, on the one hand, you'd like to see them together again, but it's just not the reality in a salary cap era for that to happen.
Yeah, and he admitted that not extending some of these players during the season might have had a negative effect. Like maybe they could have avoided some of these issues, but in his mind and the organization's mind, it was worth not giving those extensions because of everything that was going so well in that locker room. And you understand that, but with certain few of these players, like their value just kept increasing throughout the year, whether it's a Zach Bond or Mekhi Becton. Those guys really are at the front of mind when you're talking about guys who really helped their worth. But even, a Josh Sweat in the Super Bowl or Milton Williams in the Super Bowl, these are their top free agents, right? Like they all helped themselves throughout the year.
Yeah, and I still think it's worth it. I still think, and I love the philosophy of we're not going to sign anyone during the year because we don't want to upset this delicate balance in the locker room where there's no jealousy and there's no envy over contract extensions. But like you said a couple of weeks ago, it's a risky way to do things. But if the result is a Lombardi trophy, I think it's well worth it because, I mean, Dave, we've been in the locker room enough to know these guys talk about their contracts all the time. And when somebody gets an extension, that means somebody's not getting one who, maybe, deserves it. And it can create an inequity in the locker room. And that's the last thing a team with Super Bowl aspirations needs is, especially with this team being so close together. So if it costs them a player or two, so be it. I think it was worth it. I think it's a sound philosophy, and it's just difficult to see guys leave. But if you have a Lombardi, it makes it worth it.
Yeah, for the second offseason in a row, Howie talked about the need for young players to play big roles. And it's something that, Howie had said for a while, but really last year was the first time we saw that in practice, where you have to supplement this top-heavy roster by having young players on cheap rookie deals playing significant snaps. They drafted well, and they did that this past season. That's going to need to continue going forward here into this year. And it does put a little more pressure on Howie and the draft experts and their scouts to land some good players that can make an immediate impact.
Yeah, to make this work, you have to keep drafting well. And they have for a number of years now. Got to keep it going. You just, it's a lot of pressure, because if you can't afford to sign higher priced veterans, you got to make those rookie contract deals pay off. And that means those guys are going to have to play early. They're going to have to play soon, and they're going to have to play on low budget deals. And if those draft picks don't work out, you're in trouble. But I think Howie's got a pretty good record in his, I guess since about 2018, they had and they've been up and down since then, but that's when it started. 17 was a pretty bad draft, but since 18 and really over the last few years, they've been very, very good. So you have faith in their ability to draft well and field a competitive team, a very good team that's young as well. That's hard to do.
Yeah. Now, Howie was asked specifically about Zach Bond and whether or not all the success he had with the Eagles could maybe like give a contributing factor to him re-signing for a team-friendly deal. And I think it's tough to know that. But I do think if there's any player who would, like, the Eagles have two really strong candidates in Zach Bond and Mekhi Becton, guys who, came to the Eagles without much. Zach Bond was a special teamer. Mekhi Becton was unsigned through the draft. I don't think it's going to be any kind of major discount, but and it's not like you want to give them an unfair contract either, but I do think that maybe you get a little bit of a discount with some of those players.
And those are the two, I think that might be the case. When you talk to those two guys and this is their livelihood, and they finally found a place where someone believed in them and brought out the best in them, that makes a difference. They're both, Mekhi is such a sensitive guy, and, he felt so, I don't know what the word is, not betrayed, but he just felt betrayed by the Jets. And when he stands in his locker and says, Jeff Stoutland's the first person that ever believed in me. Yeah. Is he going to take a huge hometown discount? No, but I think if it's close, I would expect he would really heavily consider staying here. But you're right. Zach Bond's price just kept going up, and, you'd love to see it continue here, but these guys, Zach and Mekhi are both at an age where this is their contract. This is their big contract. And, Mekhi got a big contract when he was drafted, fairly big contract as a first round pick. But as far as second contracts, third contracts, this is it for them. So, you want to be able to, and their careers are short. Pro football players' careers are short. You might get one big contract, and that money's got to last, you and your family a lifetime. So you can't really afford to give a team too much of a discount. But I do think they both love it here. They've been very open about that. They both feel like the Eagles revived their careers, and both incredibly grateful to Howie, to Nick, to Stout in Mekhi's case, and the defensive coaches, Vic, in Zach's case. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But look, Howie's kind of preparing everybody for the inevitable. This won't be the same team next year.
Yeah, and I think it's good to have those expectations going in. He would tell you that, they'd love to sign everyone and bring back every player, but it's just not realistic. Now, in terms of outside free agents, I think there's a really good chance they're in the market for guys who get cut elsewhere, or you wait and sign them later in the process so they don't hurt you in the comp pick formula. I think they're already thinking about that. I think they've been thinking about that for a while. Basically, if you lose more than you sign, you get compensatory draft picks. And there are some years where the Eagles are invested in that formula and they know they're going to get them. There are other years where they know they're going to be able to spend and it's not going to factor in. This is one of those years where they're going to play the comp pick game and they're going to get some future picks based on guys that leave. I think they already know that.
Yeah, and we all know how he looks at draft picks. I mean, those are really valuable assets to him, and he wants to accumulate as many as possible. You can trade comp picks now, so I mean, draft picks are like Krugerrands to Howie. They have so much value. So, and I don't know if anybody in the league has a better sense of how to use that value and he has the luxury of knowing that he'll be drafting in 2029, so he can take picks and build better picks down the line, and then take those picks and build better picks. A 5 becomes a 4, the 4 becomes a 3. Next thing you know, you have a second round pick from a trade that you made 4 years ago or something. So I don't know if anybody's better at parlaying assets into better assets and then using them well to draft and doing it over a period of years, because you have the security of knowing you're going to have that job. This offseason is going to really test them in that fashion. No, but I totally agree about the comp picks, and they're really good at finding players. I don't want to say the scrap heap, but kind of reinventing players. We saw it this year. So it's a lot of pressure to put on yourself, but they're good at it, and I expect that to continue.
Yeah, and I really do think they're going to monitor the players who get cut elsewhere, because then you can sign them and it doesn't matter about the formula. So keep an eye on guys who get cut across the league. I think there will be interest in players like that. And I'm sure they already know kind of which players are going to be cut. Let me ask you about the four top.
If I can interrupt you, I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
No, I really am. I feel terrible about it. But if a player's cut, he's not considered a free agent in regard to the comp pick formula. It's only for players who finish the season. They're free agents. They're still on the roster, and then they sign with a new team. So
they play out their contracts basically.
Yeah.
Of the top 4 free agents, internal free agents, so we're talking Zach Bond, Milton Williams, Josh Sweat, Mekhi Becton. Of those 4, which do you think you have the least confidence will be back, and then the most confidence they'll be back?
That's a good question, Dave. I would say the least confidence is Sweat. Edges make a lot of money, and I just don't see Howie being able to. If you had asked me before the Super Bowl, I might not have given the same answer, but I might have. I think he made himself a lot of money in that game, and I just don't think Howie's going to be able to compete for him.
Let me answer that one before we get to the most.
Yeah.
I actually think it might be Milton, just because I think the market's going to be really robust for a 25-year-old defensive tackle in a league where, I think we've seen the shift over the last 5 to 10 years that defensive tackles with pass rush upside, there aren't as many of them as there are edge players. So I think that there's a chance the Sweat market is a little depressed, whereas I can't see Milton not getting a big payday. And I just don't know if the Eagles can compete with that. I think they'd love to keep him. I think of all these guys, like on paper, he's the one that makes the most sense to invest big time money in, because he's still just 25. He's the only player of this group I think you can confidently say is going to play better. Like his best days are still ahead of him. Right. So I think
I think Mekhi, just because he's at a new position, I think there's a lot of room for growth for him as a guard. But I
maybe, but you don't know what position teams are going to look at him to play. So
I think he's a guard, but that's another question. I think it's a good point, and I think Milton is really, really highly regarded around the league, and I don't disagree with that. Sweat's only 27. He's been around forever, so he's still a young guy. Yeah, I think he just actually came up with a really good name for a gym, Sweat Market.
I don't like that.
the sweat market. But what about who do you think is most likely to get re-signed?
Yeah, I think it's a good question because it's not just about which player they want to keep most. It's about,
Yeah,
the best way to go about it. Uh, Obviously, I think it's either Bond or Becton. I'm going back and forth on them. I still think it's Zach Bond. And I understand that like around the league, maybe there's this thought that the Eagles won't pay premium money for a linebacker still. I don't know, man. Like I think it's player to player, and I just think he meant so much to that defense that you looked at offense last year, and they signed Saquon to a top of the running back market deal, which was that bucks the trend of what they've done. But they thought the player was special enough to do that. I don't know how you watch Zach Bond in 2024 and don't feel the same way about him. So it's tough because I don't know what the market holds for Becton, and I think there's a chance he's more reasonably priced. But yeah, I think I'd still go Zach Bond.
yeah, I agree. I agree for all the reasons you just said, and he's never had a linebacker like this to re-sign. So it's not like T.J. Edwards, Alex Singleton. T.J. Edwards is a good player, but my goodness, he's never had a playmaker. I don't know, at any position like Zach Bond. So at any defensive position. So I think they'll find a way to do it. And it's got to be, you can make a case that Milton is the number one priority. You can make that case. I think it's Bond. I think it's close. But I think Howie's going to find a way to get that done. I just don't see him losing Zach Bond. I think he can be creative. I think if you set him aside, look, you're the number one priority. Let's find a way to get this done. And then you sort everything else out. And that might mean losing the other three guys. It could. But I just think you have to be such a big part of this defense and does so many things so well. Guy's an all-pro, top 5 in defensive player of the year. I don't know how you lose him. I just think Howie's going to find a way.
Yeah, and then look, there are some years where you have a plan and you think you're funneling your money this way, and then the plan changes based on what the market dictates. I remember there was a few years ago they were interested in the receivers, and then the receiver contracts were kind of out of hand, and they said, well, we're not going to spend that. They funneled their money into a different position. So there are always those types of things that end up happening. Maybe maybe they get to free agency and all of a sudden Mekhi Becton's just getting crazy offers that they feel like they can't in good conscience pay him. Then maybe it changes the math a little bit. And that happens all the time.
Yeah. And it's really interesting how, the league just decides the value of different positions and they fluctuate. And it's, I guess, impossible to predict. Maybe Howie has a sense of those things going in, but there's always surprises. There's always like, wow, there's a run on, cornerbacks. There's a run on receivers, whatever it is. So we'll know pretty soon, pretty quickly into the legal tampering period, kind of what positions. I think we'll know early on what positions are really being valued the most this year.
And then there's, it's not just free agency. Howie always makes a point to say that the talent acquisition period lasts until the trade deadline. This is a team where, if we're talking trades, they have to be involved in the conversation because Howie is one to trade. Like we've seen him do that plenty. Obviously, the big guy on the trade market this year is going to be Myles Garrett. I know Andrew Berry stood in front of a microphone today and said they don't want to trade him. Well, yeah, maybe they don't want to, but I think it's the longer this goes on, the more likely it is that they're going to have to move him. And I think Myles Garrett holds a lot of power in this because he's only going to sign an extension with the team where he wants to go. And teams aren't going to be willing to trade the amount of assets it's going to take to get him if they're not able to sign him to an extension. So there is some power for the player here. Howie did say something interesting about a trade, and he kind of said they're not in that type of position right now to pull off a big blockbuster like that. But he also said that whenever there's a player out there, they're going to be involved because they owe it to themselves and the fan base to really kick all those tires. And I'd be shocked if they're not going to kick tires on Myles Garrett.
Yeah, no question. Now, he obviously can't. Now, he's asked specifically about Myles. He can't talk about a player under contract That's tampering, illegal tampering. But he did say, yeah, I guarantee you every player that's available who's talented, we're going to do our homework on. So, yeah, and look, they have they know him. Lane knows him. Jordan knows him. I'm sure there'll be meetings in dark corners of Indianapolis bars this week with agents and various personnel people. I don't know how he could make it happen, but I know if there's a way, he will look into it.
I mean, I think he could definitely make it happen. It's just a matter of how much they're willing to part with to get it done. And
but you don't want to tear apart your team. So yeah,
you don't. But a player like that's special.
I agree.
And to think about him on a line with Jalen Carter, like, man, that's rare talent to have two of those guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, he'll also be 30 during the season. So there's a lot to weigh there.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? Do you think there's a chance they pull off some kind of trade this offseason?
I do. I'm not sure how, if it's going to be a huge cataclysmic one. But, with Howie, like, nothing he does surprises you. I mean, he does something every offseason. You're like, wow, how did he do that? So, yeah, nothing would surprise me.
I guess I buried the lead here. Howie said he's feeling fine. He's feeling okay after taking that beer can to the dome during the parade.
Yeah, he loves talking about that too.
There's a little mark right there on his forehead. You can see it a little bit. He said he didn't feel great the next day.
Yeah, I don't think it was because of that.
Yeah, maybe not.
I think it was, some of that. But yeah, he's got a lot of pride in that little cut up there. That little, I guess he'll have a little scar there. So that'll be his Super Bowl parade scar.
Yeah, it wasn't a little cut. It was a pretty big cut.
It was a gash.
Yeah. I did want to talk about Kevin Patullo. This is our first time talking to Nick Sirianni since the promotion. And I did confirm with Nick that Patullo will call plays in 2025, which we assumed, but it's good to get that clarified because, Nick did call plays early on in his head coaching career, and it didn't go well. He handed it over to Shane Steichen, and then Brian Johnson had it, and then Kellen Moore. So Patullo will call plays. He said that there were certain situations in like 2 minutes where Patullo would call some plays. So it's not completely foreign to him. He said it was always collaborative, but there were like certain situations where he would kind of like lead the charge there. So I think that's good to know. Now, we don't know how he's going to do for a full game calling. Like that's a different animal. And I think he's going to have to prove that when the games are real. But he seems confident in Patullo's ability to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting to hear. You don't want a guy who's never done. Yeah, and I think it's something Andy Reid has always done. Like he would have his top offensive assistants call a quarter, call a half, call situational stuff, just to kind of get him a taste of it. You saw how much it helped Pat Shurmur when he became head coach. But man, that was not fair. But yeah, that's good to hear. And you never know. You never know how. I mean, so much goes into play calling, and I still think Shane Steichen is the best I've ever seen at it. I thought Doug was really good at it, but Shane just had his mind was so advanced, the level of thinking and understanding what the defense was doing, why they were doing it, when they were going to do it. He knew exactly how to take advantage of that, and it was really impressive. So he's kind of the gold standard for me. I just don't know how somebody's going to react to that, that job. But, we'll see. And he's a sharp guy. He's highly regarded around the league. So, we'll see how it goes.
The one word was continuity. Nick mentioned that a bunch with that staff. And he said as much as everyone talks about, he would always go to Kevin Patullo for advice or to bounce things off of him. He said him and Kevin and Kellen were really close in that respect too. And he said it was kind of a collaboration between the two of them calling plays and going through game planning and that sort of thing. So curious to see how it goes. I think if ever Nick felt emboldened to make a decision like this, it's right now coming off a Super Bowl. And I think there are going to be certain questions about whether the offense will have enough different elements, if it will be too much of Nick's offense, too stale at times. That was his word after the 2023 season. And I think that's fair to question that. He did say there was an extensive interview process, which we don't know the names. We don't know who they talked to, but he said it was, for him, it was almost like a coaching clinic to hear all these different thoughts. And they brought in Parks Frazier, who has a little bit of a different background, was with Mike McDaniel in Miami last year. Now, I don't know how much the 33-year-old passing game coordinator is really going to be able to put an imprint on this offense, but I think you need that. I really do think you need different thought processes to come in. You can't just operate in a silo here.
No, I couldn't agree more. And I like the fact that Patullo's been here for 4 years. So he knows how things work here. He knows how Nick thinks. He's obviously been with Nick since 2018. These guys think alike, and they speak the same language, and they collaborate and they listen to each other. I think it's a healthy situation. My hunch is Patullo's going to be pretty good at it. You never know till you see it. But I just think everything's in place. There's no reason to think he won't be. So, and he's got really talented players too.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing we haven't really talked about much, and I asked Nick Sirianni about this today, was Jalen in the cleanout day. When he was asked about Patullo, he actually said something that is kind of like been in the back of my mind. And I'm paraphrasing here, but basically said when he became more assertive in the offense and saying what he wanted, he saw the success rise and he saw things go the right direction. So I think he's going to have a big say in the way this offense goes, for better or worse, this season, especially with an internal hire. Like, they didn't bring in a Kellen Moore who has all this experience as an offensive coordinator who they're going to hand it over to. So, man, not that it's going to be any kind of shock, but Jalen Hurts is going to have his handprints all over this offense this year.
Yeah, and I think that's fine.
Yeah. The only thing I wanted to talk about before this we take a break is the tush push. Obviously, the Packers, since our last podcast, the Packers have proposed a rule change that would ban the tush push or brotherly shove, whatever you want to call it, in its current form. It's been a topic we've talked about now for years. We did this a couple years ago in Indianapolis when it was proposed, and then it never even got to the voting floor. I can tell you, being here this week, it feels like it maybe has a little bit more momentum this time. And I think we know that by how strongly Nick Sirianni defended the play on Tuesday.
Yeah, he really did. He said he felt almost insulted by the implication that it's a play that anybody can run if they wanted to, and only the Eagles have success because I mean, he said we really work hard on this play. We really practice it. And we're really good at it. And he mentioned other teams have tried to run it and haven't been good at it. What he was basically saying was teams don't want to get rid of the play because it's unsafe or whatever. They want to get rid of it because we're good at it. I mean, that's what he was saying. They're just trying to penalize us because we're so good at it. And I kind of think that's the case. I mean, the league has done studies that show, and he talked about this. It's no more dangerous than any other goal line play. I think Sean McDermott, is he still on the competition committee? I think Sean is.
I believe it's McDermott, Mike Tomlin, and I forget the third one.
But Sean is pretty strong today, talking about how he doesn't like it, and he mentioned it's not safe and player safety should be paramount. And then he kind of said, well, I've seen the studies that say it's just as safe as any other play, but I think it's unsafe. And I love Sean, but I don't really know where he's coming from on that.
McVay is the third, by the way.
McVay. So, we'll see what happens. I do sense what you're saying, that it's got a little more legs this year. I still think they're not going to get rid of it. And and Nick also said, I think he said they were in the 80s in success percentage. I I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's like, it's not like we're 100% on this.
Although there are some times where they fail on third down and just get it on fourth down, which is like, that should just be a successful series of plays.
That's fair. Yeah. But it's interesting. And I don't think it's going to be banned. It might eventually. I don't think it'll be this year. But there's also, it'll be interesting to see how they, like, exactly what terminology they come up with to try to, like, what exactly are you not allowed to do? What are you allowed to do? And Nick mentioned, look, there's running plays where the O-line is pushing the running back, in the open field, not a goal line type play or fourth and short, but where a running back is moving forward and his forward progress hasn't been stopped, and the O-line is pushing him for extra yards. So his thing is, it's part of the game. It's been part of the game. You just don't like it because we're really good at it.
Yeah, he basically said it's, a lot of the opposition to it is with the guise of it being a player safety issue,
right.
Which, like, look, if there's numbers to support that, then I think it changes the equation here. But if there's not, then I don't really understand the case for it. Like, maybe it doesn't look aesthetically the way you want it to look. Tough. I mean, really, and we'll see. I still don't think it has enough support. It would take 24 of 32 owners to vote for the rule change to make it happen. I don't sense that there's that much support. I did talk to a few coaches today about it. Mike McDaniel has said, basically, if it's just about the success of the play, then I'm against changing it for that reason. But if there's player safety issues involved, then that's another thing. But until we see the data on that says that, I don't know how you implement that change. Raheem Morris, not a fan of the tush push. I think the defensive coaches are probably more on that side of it because they're the ones who have to try to stop it. We'll see what happens. I just don't get the sense that it's going away.
Yeah, I'm with you. And Nick even said, I don't remember ever seeing anybody get hurt on a tush push. I could be forgetting something, but they've never had. And he was talking about the defense and his guys. So I think if you watch it, I mean, you hold your breath for Jalen's sake every time they run it because he's getting buried in there. But other teams don't have quarterbacks as tough as him either. So they're just really good at it. They have the O-line and the quarterback and the tight ends for it. And I just don't see it going away.
Yeah, I mean, the funny thing is like, I don't know how much less successful they would be without the push element of it. I don't think it would really change it that much. I think the important part of the play is you have a center who's really good at getting low and getting that leverage. You have guards who are monsters. You have a quarterback who squats 600 pounds. I mean, those are the primary factors that lead to them being successful. It's not like 165-pound Devontae Smith pushing Jalen Hurts is really what's doing it, or like Grant Calcaterra. I think it helps on occasion, but I think it's foolish to think that that's the reason the play is successful. I think they'd be really good at quarterback sneaks if they outlawed the push element.
Yeah, I remember Kelsey telling me at the end of the 23 season that if they do get rid of it, we're still going to be, and I think we don't know he's going to retire. We kind of, at that point, he said, if they outlaw it, we're still going to be really, really good on the goal line. So, I think that's true.
Yeah, I mean, Tom Brady was great at QB sneaks without a push element. I think the teams that rep it well, the teams that are good in their technique, regardless of the push element, are going to be good at it.
Yep.
All right, let's take a little break. Plenty more on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we've got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store and nissanusa.com today.
All right, we're back on the Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. Reuben Frank and Dave Zangaro here in Indianapolis for the Combine. A little bit of news. While Howie Roseman was at the podium, I'm on my phone and I see Jason Peters has retired. John Schneider, the Seahawks general manager, and Howie Roseman buddy, announced that JP was retiring. So all of a sudden, like, I got to get a question in for Howie about Jason Peters retiring, a moment I honestly thought might never come.
Yeah, and I guess he's going to have some sort of front office type role in player development with the Seahawks. So good for him. Next stop, Hall of Fame. I believe, 9 Pro Bowls. I think he played the second most seasons among offensive linemen. So it was always fun having him around. I mean, he didn't really talk to us all that much, but when he did, he was really entertaining, and just what a great player. And this team's had just a series of elite offensive linemen, from Trey and Runyon on through JP, and then Kelsey, and then Lane and Mulata, and obviously all the other. I mean, that's just tackles. It was. You forget how good he was in his prime because he kept playing a few more years, and he was still good. But when he was at his best, I mean, I think he's one of the best to ever play the game.
I think he's the best I've ever seen. Just in terms of his peak, the things he could do were unbelievable. And I mean, Lane's right there, obviously, but not. And Lane will talk about JP for forever. I mean, he loves JP so much. He taught him so much. And Howie even said he's standing up there on the podium in year whatever it is for him as GM, and he's saying, I don't think I'd be here without Jason Peters. Like, that's how important he was to the success of the team during that span.
Yeah, he was. And, he was hurt during that run in 2017, but, he was a big part of that team. And he finally got his first postseason win in 2018, right? I think that was his first career playoff win.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was always so much fun just watching him. You would watch, you're just watching a master at work. And I was starting to wonder if he was ever going to retire. I thought he might just be one of those guys who never technically retires. He just keeps waiting for another call. But good for him. And I'm glad he's staying involved in the game. He didn't really talk to the media very often. He was very quiet. But I think players have so much respect for him. And, from what guys said, like in the locker room and meetings and stuff, he was vocal and he was, a great leader. So it's good to see he's going to stay involved in the game and in a role like that and keep having a positive effect on younger players.
I remember talking to Big V a few years after that Super Bowl run about Jason Peters and just how much he really did teach him during that run. V basically was like, yeah, I was out there, but it was basically like he was playing through me. Like, that's how much he was in his ear throughout the whole process. So I wish Big V would have told me that in 2017. I had to wait a few years after that to hear from him. But yeah, I mean, Jason Peters is an all-time Eagle. And you're right. I hope people remember how good he was, because to me, like, if that dude's not a Hall of Famer, like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, and I was talking to Lane late in the season about I don't know how JP's name came up. I think we were talking about Kelsey, what year he was going in the Hall of Fame, or what year he was eligible, which I would think he would go in that year. And he asked me what year JP's eligible. I said, I don't know, 2045. He's like, oh, he never retired, did he? Like, yeah. So, but it's amazing that. I mean, because I think Lane has a shot at the Hall of Fame. You could have 3 offensive linemen from this period of Eagles history go to the Hall of Fame, which is astonishing. And really should. That's enough for me to put Jeff Stoutland in the Hall of Fame. It won't happen, but I think he's deserving.
Yeah, you're right. It won't happen. There's no precedent for that. But yeah, it is amazing that now it wasn't all. I guess right. JP was here before Stout, and Kelsey was technically for a couple years with Mudd. But
and Kelsey will tell you that Howard Mudd had a big effect on him too. But yeah, he wasn't an elite player until Stout got him.
Yeah, I remember doing that Jason Peters story 10 years after the trade, and it was just it really was like a pivotal moment for the franchise, landing a player of that caliber.
And I would tell everyone out there, find that story. Dave wrote a story about how that trade came to be, and it was really, really good read. So check it out. JP, maybe the greatest undrafted player ever.
Oh yeah, I mean, yeah, it is crazy to think he was undrafted, and then he ends up having this Hall of Fame career. Yeah, I think he's one of them.
That's how it came up. We were talking about the greatest practice squad players ever. JP was actually on the Bills practice squad.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody could have signed him, but I think he was still a tight end at that point. And Lane was like, how do you look at that guy and say, let's put him at tight end?
He got a little bigger later than that.
He did, but he was pretty big. He was a pretty good blocker. But, yeah, good for JP, and we wish him well.
Yeah. I'm just looking at my notes here from Howie and Nick today, if there are any leftovers. There was one thing Howie was asked specifically about Moro Ojima and Jalix Hunt and whether or not they're ready to play bigger roles. And he said, like, yeah, like we were impressed by them this year. Now, obviously, you're asking about those two in particular because two of the free agents ahead of them are Milton Williams and Josh Sweat. So if those guys leave, you're going to need more from them. I don't know if we've done a pod since the Nolan Smith news. Have we?
No, we haven't.
No, yeah. He tore his triceps during the Super Bowl, which is insane. And he somehow like finished out at least part of the game with that injury and then partied like he wasn't hurt at all for the next 2 days.
I'll tell you what, his triceps might have been torn, but his ability to knock down cold beverages was not impaired at all.
So I think that's worthwhile to note that like Ojima and Hunt, like when Howie talks about these young players, he's not just talking about rookies who they're going to draft. He's talking about some players who are already there. And I think those two guys are going to play a big role in that.
And they both improved so much during the season. I would have liked to have heard a longer, more detailed answer to that question. Howie was in that mode of like one sentence answers there for a while.
Which, hey, I appreciate. He's trying to get through and get as many as he can. Sure.
But you'd like to hear a little more detail on what he likes about both those guys. But they were both really impressive. I mean, yeah, you could just see him getting better each week.
Mm-hmm. The other things here I wrote down. I actually asked Nick about Vic Fangio. I'm sure you saw some players say that Vic was not happy about the second half of the Super Bowl and talked to them about that. Nick got a little smile when I asked him about that. He said, yeah, after we brought the team together, and he said, I kind of joked that we were going to go through tape, and then I said, no, we're going to celebrate. And then Vic made him ask the defense to stay. And he wanted to talk a little bit about it. And he's like, that's why you love Vic. Like, he's still not satisfied. And it was kind of a fun moment for Nick to remember that.
Yeah, now the last touchdown, they had the backups in. The Chiefs' last touchdown with a few seconds left. But, yeah, that's Vic. I mean, that's Vic in a nutshell.
He talked about Parks Frazier a little bit, just that he thinks that he's going to bring some new elements to the offense. Kind of curious to see what that role is for a guy like that. I really think the reason you bring someone in like that is you got to keep restocking your not your front office, but your coaching staff in the likely scenario that they have another good year and you lose someone else.
Yep. And Nick's talked about that. I mean, it's a pipeline, and it's hard to find good talent and develop that talent. And when you do, you lose them. So it's something that if this team keeps having success, he's going to have to keep dealing with.
All right. You want to do a few questions here?
Sure.
We don't have time for a ton of them, but we'll get to a few. If you have a question for us, it's eagle-eyed NBC Uni. That's eagle-eyed NBCUNI.com. QR code is on the screen. We got a bunch more defensive nicknames. Please don't send me any more of those. I regret ever doing it. I'm getting them I'm waiting for one to come to my house by mail, by carrier pigeon. I'm getting them on every account I've ever had in life. So
people are sending them to you on AOL Messenger.
Yeah, exactly. All right. First one is from Paul. Great job in your bold predictions, Rube. In honor of your insight, here are a few bold predictions I throw out there for your comments. We have 3 bold predictions. I want your take on all of them. Number 1, 10 years from now, even with Quinion and Cooper perennially making Pro Bowls, we'll look back at Jalix Hunt as the steal of the 2024 draft.
Well, I think he's got a bright future, but I think you're talking about two really elite young defensive backs there. But I mean, Steele, third round versus first and second round. Um, I That's a bold prediction. I don't quite agree with. I think
Yeah.
those two rookie D-backs are the real deal.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's really about the terminology you're using there. Steal, like you wouldn't call Quinyon Mitchell a steal because he's a first round pick. I do think Hunt showed enough upside this year to think, man, maybe they found something here, and he's still so raw, still willing to learn that he could be really good.
Yeah, I agree.
2, Howie Roseman will once again reach into his bag of tricks and unload Bryce Huff's contract as a part of the massive package that brings Myles Garrett to the Birds on draft night 2025.
Sure, why not? Yeah, good luck with that. I don't think he's got a whole lot of value, but hey, Howie traded Byron Maxwell, so anything's possible, I guess.
Byron and Kiko, right?
Byron and Kiko. But Byron was worse. Like, Kiko was just, mediocre. He was just there. Byron Maxwell was terrible.
And number 3, this is before Patullo got named OC, so he's already on the right track. Kevin Patullo will be named OC, but after 4 lackluster games, Nick Sirianni will take over the play calling, showing how much he learned watching Shane Steichen and Kellen Moore and demonstrate that he's become great at it.
It's an interesting prediction. It wouldn't completely shock me, but I think Patullo's going to be pretty good at it. And I really don't think Nick even wants to do it anymore. I think he really likes the role he's in. I think he's really comfortable in it. I think he makes a big difference in it without being encumbered by the play calling piece of it. So from that standpoint, I really don't see that. But you never know with Nick.
Yeah, and I also think 4 games would be way too quick.
How many was it in 21? We don't really know. It's about 6 probably.
Yeah, it was deeper than that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think it will be that quick, especially because you're right. I think he enjoys the role he's in. I think he sees the benefit of not calling plays.
Yeah.
And I also don't like, if you're Nick, you can't make this move and then strip one of the biggest responsibilities of your guy that you just promoted. I think it's a bad look.
Yeah.
Michael. Hey guys, given the age of core players on this roster and the star talent at multiple positions, what do you think is a realistic 5-year outlook for this team? Assuming key players stay relatively healthy, do you think the Eagles can match the Chiefs' recent run of 3 Super Bowl victories in 5 years? The Vic Fangio defense isn't going anywhere and is loaded with young talent. On offense, Jalen Hurts is still only 26, and A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Saquon Barkley are all 28 or younger. More importantly, Howie Roseman has proven time and time again that he can find talent in the draft despite not always having high picks. Plus, his savvy trades and free agent signings should help keep the roster strong year after year.
3 and 5 years. Who's won 3 and 5 years? The Steelers won 4 and 6 years in the 70s, Bradshaw and Franco. Dallas won in 92, 93, 95, I believe. I don't think the Niners ever did. That's really hard to do. I think they're going to be really good. I would, if I had to guess, I'd say they win another one in the next 5 years. But 3 and 5 years, that might be a little optimistic. But they definitely have a lot of pieces in place. They're going to be really good. I mean, they're going to be really good with this nucleus, and they are young. But so many things have to go right as far as health and the way the ball bounces and, the playoff matchups. A lot has to go right just to get there. And then you're playing the best team in the AFC. So I'll say they win one more in the next 4 years. So 2 and 5 years, which would be 3 and 12 years, 3 and 13 years, which would be pretty darn impressive. Yeah.
And I think I agree with the rationale for it. Like, I think they are set up to be good for a long period of time. I think it'll be important to not be sentimental and try to latch on to this team and to be willing to move on. And I think that's a lesson that at least Howie has said he learned. from the way 17 turned into 18 and 19 and 20, that you do have to be willing to make changes and not just run it back with the same exact team, because that team gets older and the rest of the league catches up. But yeah, you look at the cornerstone pieces and there's no reason to think this team won't be a contender for at least the next few years.
Yeah, obviously the Patriots won. Ben's messaging us. 49ers 3 and 6 years. Patriots had a bunch of stretches, I guess. 01, 03, 04. Niners 3 and 6 years. But yeah, look, as great as Saquon is, the history of running backs when they get in their late 20s, especially ones coming off this kind of workload, it's not great. I think there's a chance he might be immune to that because of the way they protect him and take care of him, and he takes care of himself, and he's off Wednesdays, and they don't tackle to the ground in training camp. I'm really interested to see how long Saquon can play at this level, because I wouldn't be shocked if he is an exception to a rule that's pretty, concrete, that running backs in their late 20s. I mean, look at Derrick Henry. He was, he had maybe his best year this year. So that's going to be a big part of it, because he's a huge part of what they do.
Yeah, that's fair. Next one is Caden from New Hampshire. I'm 25 years old, and my dad, who grew up in Bucks County, and I have been listeners since very close to the beginning, and always love discussing the stuff you talk about after listening. Have you guys ever had any personal favorite, more under-the-radar type players from across the NFL that ended up on the Eagles? For example, I'd always enjoyed following LeGarrette Blount and Gardner Minshew before they were in Philadelphia. Were there any similar players for you guys?
Well, Art Monk is one of them, because we went to the same high school and we were teammates on the track team at White Plains. Richard Dent, he finished his career with the Eagles, and he was actually still pretty good and just a great guy, Hall of Famer. Those are a couple who came to the Eagles at the end of their career. Obviously, Irving Fryer. Those are a few guys who, you're always kind of like James Lofton finished his career with the Eagles. So it's always good kind of like getting to know those guys who've had these great careers and finding what they're all about at the end of their career.
One of the ones for me was Michael Bennett.
Yeah.
Gosh, I just loved watching him play. And that was even aside from the peculiar character he was. He was just a different type of guy. But, man, watching he was like – there was something like beautiful about the way he played football. It was so untethered. So to get to watch that was really fun. And then even though he was well past his prime, obviously, having Julio Jones in the building was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
There aren't many players that they walk in and everyone goes, oh.
Yeah,
that's Julio. And then, Michael Vick, I mean, growing up, Michael Vick was the most fun player to watch ever. And then he obviously had a rough few-year stretch there. But then to see him still have some of that magic left and to watch him throw a football was like, my God.
I remember his very first practice. We're out there at practice, and he's like, it's just warm-ups, and he's standing there, and he doesn't move his legs. He just kind of flicks the ball, and it goes like 55 yards in a tight spiral without going more than like 8 feet off the ground, just standing there. He threw the most beautiful ball, and really interesting guy. I was really glad I got to know him. He's probably the player who's most different than my expectations of him. That's a story for another day. But, yeah, those are all good ones.
Next question from Joe. David and Rube, still basking in the glow of our Super Bowl win and missing your daily pods. Thanks for all you do. One of the Eagles' superpowers this year was our offensive line, and it felt like no matter who we put out there, they outmuscled the defense. In particular, Tyler Steen and Fred Johnson, I thought, played great. And looking back at the full season snap counts, those two combined to play about 70% of the offensive snaps. With Mekhi Becton and Fred Johnson both going to free agency, do you think the Birds elevate Tyler Steen to starting right guard? Should we prioritize re-signing Big Fred or Mekhi? And if not, are you confident somebody else is ready to step up, like a Trevor Keegan, to play that critical six-man role?
Yeah, those are all good questions. I thought Tyler Steen was up and down. I really liked the way Fred Johnson played. He played better than I anticipated. I think he started 5 real games, and then a Giants game at the end. But yeah, I'm not. I don't think it's as simple as if Becton leaves, you give right guard to Tyler Steen. I think we'll see who's on the roster, who they go out, who they draft, who they sign, and what the position looks like. I'd like to see competition at right guard, and I think there will be some between Steen and somebody else if Becton's not here.
Yeah, the draft is a big one. We talked about it last draft. We thought maybe they would take an offensive tackle / guard who could maybe compete for guard day one, grow into the right tackle role. And that's the other element of Becton that we haven't really talked about too, is like a part of the equation of potentially re-signing him could be that Jeff Stalin sees him as their future right tackle, which is very possible.
It is. Yeah. If anybody can get him on the right track to play tackle, yeah, Stout can. I wonder how many more years Lane wants to play. 2 years, maybe. We don't know. Boy, I talking to him locker cleanout day. I mean, he just can't wait for next year. It was really good to hear him sound so upbeat about continuing to play. But yeah, certainly, I'm sure they've thought about it. I'm sure Stout has it in his mind. That's the way they are in this organization. They're looking at 2026, 2027. They're figuring it all out.
The next one is not really a question, more of a comment, but I thought it was a good one from Steven. Hey, Reuben Dave, discovered your pod back in September when I was driving back and forth from Rhode Island to Philly for work and haven't missed an episode since. Absolutely love the pod. There. Yeah, it is. Keep up the great work. I now live in Honolulu, and your pod is an excellent way to keep me connected with the team and my family who have been lifelong Eagles fans and still reside in Philly and South Jersey. I placed a $100 bet on the Birds to win the Super Bowl back in August with a payout of $1,200. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with the winnings until my sister invited me to stay with her place in Philly, so spending it on going to the parade, going to be a long 5,000-mile flight, but worth it to see the team go down broad. Thanks for all the great work you do. P.S. for Rube, as a Navy pilot, I love any and all flyovers, even if it's ridiculous to do it for a dome game.
Couldn't agree more.
I love that. Yeah. Took the winnings and said, I'm going to the parade. That's pretty cool.
That's great. Good for him.
Yeah. Hope you had a good time, Steven. If you have a question for us, Eagle-Eyed NBC Uni. That's Eagle-Eyed NBC.com. Rube, do you have any final words today?
No. Enjoy that Indianapolis nightlife.
I will try. If you enjoy the Eagle Eye podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please click the like button and subscribe there as well. That's all the time we have today. For Rube, I'm Dave. This has been Eagle Eye, presented by Nissan. We'll talk to you soon.